早晨咁多位，歡迎大家嚟到今日3月20號嘅 UABB Call for Exhibitors and Salon 4。我哋今日咧會成個 session 咧就會11點開始嘅，咁就會有兩個 speaker 啦。我哋而家請我哋嘅 curator 阿飛出嚟同我哋開始我哋嘅 presentation。唔該，阿飛。
Okay, 唔該意。Hello， 大家早晨。So, welcome everyone to the fourth and final salon for the UABB 2022. My name is Faye, one of the curators this year. 好歡迎大家嚟到今朝禮拜日朝頭早11點都 join 我哋嘅 webinar 啦。今日係我哋 UABB 2022年第4個，亦都係最後一個嘅 before show 嘅 webinar 啦。咁今日嘅webinar咧會係一半中文一半英文嘅，咁但係咧無論係用緊邊個 language 嘅時候咧，你都可以喺 Zoom 嗰度咧去選擇嗰個 interpretation， 可以揀英文或者中文，我哋係會有即時傳譯嘅，咁係 Carla 幫我哋手做呢個即時傳譯嘅工作啦。So, this webinar today will be carried out in English in halfway, and then the other half will be in Cantonese. So that's why we have simultaneous interpretation provided. So in your Zoom software window, at the bottom of it, there is an interpretation option. So you can pick either English or Cantonese throughout the entire webinar. So let me briefly introduce the organizers for UABB 2022. So the lead organizer is HKIA Biennale Foundation with 3 co-organizers: Hong Kong Institute of Architects, Hong Kong Institute of Planners, and Hong Kong Designers Association. The lead sponsor of this whole event is Create Hong Kong of the Government of Hong Kong Special Administrative Region. And we have a list of supporting organizations. One of them is American Institute of Architects Hong Kong Chapter. So a little bit about the timeline of this year's UABB. It's a little bit unusual because usually we have it happening in December and then maybe run till March. But this year is a bit special in a way that we will start earlier in late August and then have it run till November. Curatorial team this year is relatively a bigger group of curators. We have 6 curators this year. All of us graduated from undergrad of Hong Kong U Architecture in different years, of course. So all of us, 5 of us are working architects, practicing architects, and me myself is registered in the US. Alfred is registered in the Netherlands, and he specialized in urban studies in Hong Kong as well. Wen is not the only non-architect in our group. She is more of a transdisciplinary theater and art practitioner who specialized in drama, theater, stage design. She is also a teacher at Lee Shoo Kee Hong Kong School of Creativity. And Erica and Nikki work in the same office, and both of them work a lot on adaptive reuse projects. Carla and Nikki both are very active in the conservation, architectural conservation realm field of Hong Kong, so as Alfred. So Carla is now a practicing architect in Hong Kong with mostly working on historical conservation projects. We also have a curatorial assistant, Jeffrey, graduated from the Chinese University of Hong Kong with a Bachelor of Social Science in Urban Studies and Program. He has very wide experience in multidisciplinary art practices and also community programs. So that's why he's of great help in the team. The curatorial direction of this year is called Seeds of Resilience, and we really want everybody to rediscover the city of Hong Kong. In the past few years, Hong Kong has been hit by multiple waves of crisis, and even till now, we're still in one of those. But because of these difficult times, more and more of these bottom-up or grassroots efforts are coming up from not only the architects or planning professions realm, but also from every corner of Hong Kong. It could be a bunch of handymen grouped together to serve, to form a team to serve the underprivileged people. It could be NGO that focuses on housing, grouped together to write a paper report to the government. So all this kind of bottom up or grassroots effort is the kind of ideas and efforts that we want to pull out from different parts of Hong Kong and be put under the spotlight of UABB 2022. Another thing that we want to do is to make this Biennale of architecture and urbanism really for everyone instead of just for the professionals or the academia. This year, we want to encourage everybody to collaborate outside of the professional realm with either NGO or some local communities or Facebook groups that have certain research focus. Just talking about seeds of resilience might be too broad or too vague. So that's why we have 4 sub-themes that focuses on very important issues that Hong Kong cares about. The first one is community design and social design, and we group everything into bottoms up. Hong Kong is the city that is forever changing, and this kind of metabolism is inevitable. So, but then how do we find the new equilibrium, or how do we keep the harmonious community energy or dynamics within these changes? Traditionally, we have planners or architects doing top-down design, deciding what your city will look like, what your neighborhood will look like. But then the trend is kind of going in reverse, meaning more social engagement, more public engagement should be included in the design process. So this kind of community design or social design experiments are still in relatively small scale, but we want to pull out these projects to look at them and see what can be done better. What are the good things about these approach? So that's our first sub-theme, bottoms up. And the second one is called Cohabitation, Diversity and Inclusion. Hong Kong takes pride in being a really accepting city with multiple cultures melting together. But how do we often design for the non-mainstream population? Has these design strategies been widely published, or has they been taken seriously to even include it in the building ordinance or building code? So in this topic, we want to highlight the design strategies that are geared towards the underprivileged, people with disabilities, elderly, or even ethnic minorities or LGBT communities. So we want to find out all these strategies that could make Hong Kong a happy city for everyone, not just the mainstream. The third and the fourth one both focuses on sustainability. The first one is called Human Nature Symbiosis, Sustainable Planning. So looking at a more macro scale of how sustainability can be enforced in the planning scale. And then the second one is Living Manifesto, Alternative Living and Low Carbon Living. So it's a very micro scale from a personal perspective. How can we really apply the sustainability rules and living low carbon? If you're interested in submitting as one of the exhibitor, you are more than welcome to go back and revisit our previous briefing sessions that has been recorded both in Cantonese and English. So if you use your phone, scan this QR code right now, you will be brought over to the YouTube channel, and then you can revisit our presentation. So this is the YouTube channel. You're more than welcome to follow it, although we only have a few videos as of now. It's called Seeds of Resilience, HKSC UABB Hong Kong 2022. Okay, talking about venue. Now we have a tentative venue at the North Point East Pier. It's a naturally ventilated site, which is easily accessible by public transportation. And we think that it could be a really interesting and a site that not a whole lot of us have visited. Even, I mean, I haven't been there before UABB. Other satellite venues that we're considering include Central Market, Sangwagoon, which is an organic farming community in Campton, an alley shop, and then another alley shop in Shenzhen. So one in Wan Chai, the other one in Shenzhen. If you would like to submit for a proposal, we highly encourage you to submit for Central Market and North Point East Pier. And from all those exhibits, proposal that we received, we would kind of select ones that might be interesting to put in those more special sites, because those would involve more communication with the site owner and really work out the synergy. So those might take more time. So if you are submitting proposal, please consider North Point East Pier and Central Market first. And we really want to do something that's specialized for those smaller venues. You're welcome to talk to us. This year's UABB will be a blend of physical and virtual site, meaning, okay, the actual one will be in the physical spaces that I just mentioned. We also have online salons, which could also be offline later on when COVID situation allows. The virtual site is not only an effort to combat or tackle this social distancing situation. Our intent is also to archive all the works that has been done for this 3 months exhibition and make them available for a longer period of time. So even after this 2-year period of time, when the next UABB has to happen in 2024, we would want to keep this virtual archival bank of information somewhere on the internet. Besides the social impact and cross-disciplinary collaboration that I just mentioned, we would also like to encourage participants or exhibitors to think of ways that could minimize carbon footprint. For example, making your exhibits into useful objects instead of printing panels that will be mounted on foam board. And then after the exhibition, these just become trash that goes to the landfill. So what about printing your exhibits, of course, in great, nice graphics on maybe shower curtains or picnic mats, things that could be used after the 2022 UABB. Or you could also consider using reusable or recycled, upcycled material, or source local material, meaning we have lined up with Y Park, or there are other sorts of locally upcycled or recycled materials that you could use, including locally sourced timber. For exhibition format, we have these 3 listed out for your consideration. The first one is making a device or an installation that could be finished setting up in 2 days, suitable for outdoor area, and that is carbon footprint conscious, which demonstrate how alternative living could be done. The second option is to really carry out a bottom-up project. So some of you are already doing or working on some bottom-up project that includes engaging the community. We are more than happy to, for you to submit a proposal that is like a little branch of project from what you are already doing. Third one is really submit anything that is aligned with our curatorial statement, the 4 sub-themes. It could be images, installations, multimedia, research, document, models. Make it useful, make it recyclable, and try to collaborate. For submission requirements, these details, you can find it on the HKIA website. So how to find it? First thing is, now we're at the HKIA website now. So if you click on what's on, and then search for UABB. Okay, the first post that pop up is where you can find all the deck that I just showed, the application form in Word version, which we will have to complete and return to us by email by the 4th of April, 3 p.m. And then, so here's the email that you should send to. And all the information that we have been showing today can be downloaded here. Just click on this and then you will find the whole deck with all the information embedded. Okay. All right, so as I said, you have to complete an application form for potential exhibitors and also submit a few sheets of A4 images with the file name clearly labeled, so we know who you are. So 2 to 4 pages of A4 images, renderings, sketches, photo montage, anything that could explain what your design looks like and how the installation fits into particular spaces. For example, if you are proposing an installation for the North Point Pier, then you need to show us, okay, roughly you need a place with more sunlight, less sunlight, or can your piece endure the rain and the potential typhoon that might happen in late August? So for the salons, we have carried out so far 4 sessions, and all these videos are available on our Facebook page and also our YouTube channel. If you are having any questions or doubts on maybe what to submit, I have a few ideas which one would be better or more suitable. You're more than welcome to text us or contact us via Facebook. Just search for @UABB Hong Kong. Okay, so this is all for the briefing session. And next up, we will have Ruby Lai and Ernest Poon from our speakers to talk to us about community design playground and also her study, Ruby's study on subdivided housing family practice. So I will pass on the thing. I'll pass it on to Alfred now to introduce our speakers.
Okay. Hello, this is Alfred Ho. Thanks, Paige, for the introduction. Today is our last Curatorial Salon of UABB 2022 before the deadline of the cover exhibitor. So we'll have 2 talks concerning reimagining community and public space. And there will be 2 speakers. The first will be Ruby Lai of Department of Sociology and Social Policy at Lingnan University. She'll introduce us in English for the informal housing or inadequate housing in Hong Kong and how the household cultivate the family life in this informal or inadequate housing and how this activity extend beyond this very small living space to the community. And then we'll have our second speaker, Ernest Poon, who will speak in Cantonese for the place area. So he will talk about where the children could play during the pandemic and how he foresee the children play in the post-pandemic in the future. So let's welcome Ruby Lai for the first talk.
Okay. So thank you, Everett, for the introductions. And I'm Ruby, and I'm really happy to be invited here to deliver the talk. Just a disclaimer, I'm not an architect, I'm not a planner, and I'm not a designer. I'm a sociologist who is interested in family and gender. So that's why I try to study the family practice in these subdivided units. So the topic of my presentation is Prophecy, Space, and Caregiving, Family Practice in Cubicle Homes. So I guess like subdivided units or subdivided flats in Cantonese, which is tong fong, is not an unfamiliar topic for many of us who live in Hong Kong or even live outside Hong Kong, because it's actually it's a phase of poverty of this affluent city. It's just a very brief outline. So I will talk a little bit about the background of the issue and also my research. And then I will introduce the way how I conduct my research. And then I will try to show you all these spatial strategies that used by the families to cultivate their family lives. So this is just a photo to show you the conditions of these subdivided units. This is really a common portrayal, and you can actually Google it. When you Google subdivided unit, you will see something like that. And so we all know that it is a very deprived living environment, and we actually can see it in front of our eyes. But what we can't see is the resilience of these families living in subdivided units, how they try to negotiate with these very difficult housing condition. So that's exactly why I try to delve into this issue, to show their resilience, which is the topic of this salon too. So a little bit background. All of us know that Hong Kong is a densely populated city with one of the highest housing and rental price. And so the average waiting time for public rental housings is 6 years. It's increasing steadily throughout the years. And from our experience, we see that many of these families, they live in the subdivided unit for like 9 years and they're still waiting for public housing. So that 6 years may not be so accurate in reality. And subdivided unit, we know it, and then it's kind of like a new form of informal housings that emerged in the past 2 decades. So we do have lots of informal housing. We have bed space apartment, we have partition room, we have rooftop housing, and subdivided units is kind of like a new form, as I said. So you may think that it is kind of legal, but then many of them are not, because if you wanted to make it legalized, you have to make an application to the building department, and then they approve that, and then you can like make it legally. But then many of these owners of the subdivided flats, they did not do so. So that make it kind of like an informal status. So these flats, they are tiny. We all know that. The median floor areas is like 100 square feet, but they're not cheap. So you have to pay 4,500 Hong Kong dollars for that 100 square feet. So yeah, that's life. Okay, so there are lots of literature in sociology that touch on space, housing, and family life. And so we sociologists conceive family not just in terms of forms or structure, but then we also see family as an entity that constitute by active everyday actions and practices. So the practices or actions that are done by the family members. And so these practices constitute a family or give us a sense of being part of a family. So that's why housing or home space is so important, because it provides the environment for these practices or interactions to occur. Okay, so they are located in such kind of housing space. And these housing space is also crucial for the constructions of individual identity, like as a mother or as a son or daughters or as a husband. So these space are crucial. So, but then we will wonder, so in such kind of inadequate housing space or deprived housing conditions where you do not have any partition, you do not have a decent bedroom or a kitchen or a bathroom. So how can you cultivate your family life? How these family practices are being shaped in such kind of deprived condition or inadequate space? So that's exactly my research questions. How these families do family in such kind of limited space. So my study, I conducted ethnographic observations. So I'm a qualitative researcher. So I conducted ethnographic observations in the neighborhood, which is in Kwai Ching district. And it is a low to middle income neighborhood. And I observed the neighborhood and also the homes of these subdivided units talent. No, they're not subdivided, okay? And I also interviewed them. So I'm not just curious about their housing conditions, but then I'm basically interested in their life. So I asked about their housing tenure and their migrations history, and then basically their life stories. I interviewed 35 SDU families, and most of them are low-income families. And they live in quarters with a median housing size of 100 square feet. and they pay $4,700 Hong Kong dollars per month for these very tiny units. So I will try to share with you the spatial strategy that I identified. So I divided into two categories. The first one is homemaking strategy that occur within the units. And the second one is the space within the neighborhood, which outside their housing units. So we will see some of the example one by one. So the first homemaking strategy is demarcating physical and spatial boundaries. So they are physically visible, these boundaries. So these boundaries are demarcated to preserve privacy and to divide a very tiny unit into different functional areas. So this is a very common strategy that used by the tenants. They will often use wooden bedboards or curtains or any other kind of furniture or household item to create these private spaces. And so these space or these boundaries, they are not permanent, they're not fixed. They are always flexible because you need to change these boundaries in order to satisfy the family needs that would be changed throughout different stages of family life cycle. So that's a very dynamic process and extremely interesting to see. Yeah, this is the quote, but because of the time, I can't really spell it out. Yeah, but then you can look at it in the picture. So the second strategy would be maintaining livable space. Of course, we know that these tiny units in a really poor condition for some. So there are a lot of damages or like water linkage, like the housing attributes are quite deprived. But then these tenants, they try their very best to maintain a livable space for their children or their family members by doing DIY maintenance or decorating the space or simply keep the space clean and tidy. So cleanliness is one of the very crucial elements considered by my interviewees, because they think that cleanliness or tidiness can make a place like home, and then which can create a sense of home for the children and then make them feel confident. So this is also part of the kind of identity construction process. And that's crucial. Yeah. So the third one is ratifying space. As we all know that space is very limited in such kind of unit. And so many talents told me that if you don't use those spaces, they are not space at all. So you have to use that. Okay, so you have to transform it to usable space by different types of strategies. So as you can see, there are many different types, like putting up wall shelves. So they're not designer, but then they design all these things. So they use cabinet shelf to build cooking areas, and then they because these tenants does not have a kitchen in the unit, so she had to build it herself. And for this one, it's my favorite. So these tenants use a bug bag to create a storage space for her daughters, 7-year-old daughters, with the ceiling. And then these storage spaces are crucial for her daughters to keep her childhood toy, because it carries her childhood memories and it marks her identity. So her mother can relate to it, and then she deliberately created space for her daughter. So I think this is a really mothering thing to do. And so they all use these different types of very makeshift way to create more space. And then it's transforming space. So in the same area, they will have multiple purposes. So that may be the living room for children to play, and then also the spaces for the family to have dinner together and also to have leisure time. And then so they're transforming the same space by using different types of items or furnitures. And so this is another favorite of mine. So this talent, she's a mother. She tried to use this dining table to gather all her family members. There's 5 of them together because the units is too small for the whole family to live together. So 2 of the family members, they have to sleep outside. So outside another unit, but not on the street. So she needs to calculate very meticulously about the size of this table so that it can fit into that very tiny space in the unit. So this is a very basic family practice that we often taken for granted, which sit together and eat. But then for these talents, it needs a lot of calculations and meticulous planning. Okay. So the last one for homemaking strategy is to perform time-space management. It is not very desirable, but then it is actually a survival skill, because as you can see that in some units, the bathroom and then also the kitchen, they are kind of conjoined together. So they have to manage the schedule of using these 2 places. So that they will not the family members will not compete for the space and then create lots of family conflicts. So it requires the fitting of the schedule of different family members. So that's a very tiring process too. Anyway, so let's move to the spaces that outside the unit, which is the spaces in the neighborhood. So these talents, they also try to domesticating all these neighborhood spaces to sustain their family lives, to meet their basic family needs that cannot be satisfied within their unit because it's so inadequate, right? So I kind of classify these spaces into 3 types. So the first type is shared spaces. So these spaces do exist in the building where the SDU located, but then it's kind of displayed in the shared area. So this is outside the units and then outside the apartment, and then so they will try to make it into a storage area, or they dry the clothes there, or they even cook there because they can't cook within the unit. But then it's also very complicated. I mean, the accessibility, because it is shared. So if you kind of cross the line, and then it will kind of annoy other uses of this space. So you have to maintain that kind of invisible boundaries that can keep the equilibrium of the using of the space. So it's very complicated process and lots of negotiation. And the second type of space is familial space. So this is a very tricky thing. So initially, these talents, they choose to live in this district. It is because that their extended family also live in this district, which is in the public housing that are located in Kwai Ching. So living near their extended family can help them to mobilize familial network, and then to help them to satisfy their everyday life. So some of them, they send their children to their family homes, which is bigger and better for their children to play and work. And then so that's it's also a way to elevate the pressure within the unit. So this is a familial space that are also very crucial for them. And the last one is the open space, the public space and commercial space in the neighborhoods that they are living in. So as we can see that, so in these public spaces, they're trying to kind of using certain types of guerrilla tactics. They will use it because, of course, we know that it's heavily guarded. These spaces are policed, of course, and so they have to like kind of skillfully use it in a particular time and in a way that will not trigger the attention of the authority. So they will use it to dry clothes or to put some sofa chairs together and gather in this community, but they're not now. So this is the use of open space. Of course, there are also very many parks and other kind of open space in the environment that they often use it. And so another type of space is commercial space. There are lots of shopping malls and also wet markets and restaurants in the neighborhood. And of course, we know that they are capitalist or capitalized. So you have to consume in order to access this space. But then these tenants also use them or transform them into some resources that we cannot imagine. So in this McDonald's, for example, some of the children of the subdivided units family, they will attend online classes here during the pandemic because they have no stable Wi-Fi access at their home, so that they will go to McDonald's for the free Wi-Fi access for the online classes. So that's also not desirable, but then they are very agentically use these spaces for their own purpose. So this is the last slide of my presentation. I just want to draw your attention to the present situation. Since the fifth wave started, what we witnessed and what we observed from our interviewee is that their access to these neighborhood space are cut off. So they can't go to the park, they can't, many restaurants are closed, and then they are forced to stay in their unit, which make their life really hard. And so these presentations is showing individuals' resilience, so the individual strategy to elevate the very hard or difficult condition under structural inequality. So we really acknowledge these individuals' resilience, but then the question is, so without changing the structural dynamic or structural conditions, individual resilience are very fragile. So what we have to think about is that, of course, we acknowledge the agency of these talents, these disadvantaged group, but then also the next step would be how we can build resilience at a community or even a societal level. And I believe that it is the questions that we should think about after or during the pandemic. So that's all of my presentation. I hope that I'm not overrun too long. So I look forward to your question and thank you very much.
Okay, thanks Ruby Life for the very informative talk. We'll leave the Q&A section to the end. So let's welcome our second speaker, Ernest Poon, for the second talk first.
Hello， 咁多位，係咪而家睇到個 PowerPoint 啊
？Hello everybody。
好，唔該你。咁咧就我係Playwright Play Environment Team 嘅 Ernest 啦，咁好高興。
I am Ernest from Playwright。
一齊咧去探討韌性城市，尤其是係從。
So I'm very happy to share our perspective on a resilient city. So I am not a planner, but myself and my team work hard to provide a really planned play spaces for children, respecting. So during the pandemic, children are forced to stay at home. So and during the pandemic, it's really important to think about how to develop children's resilience through planning of public spaces. So during May and August 2021, we tried to understand children in 2 to 15 years old, the play behavior. So before we talk about the research results, We also want to talk about the importance of public space and play space. Playing, it's very important to children, including physical development, social communication, thinking and cognition. So the American Academy of Pediatrics even advised doctors to use play as a new prescription to promote children's health. So there are some formal play space with formats and some play equipment. They can play in but they can also play in basketball grounds, corridors in housing estates, and those are informal and non-designated play space. We're going to discuss both. So the first finding is that there is a significant drop in playtime, and especially the decline in outdoor playtime. And we also observe that children stay within their residence or within their home housing estate to play instead of traveling to far areas. So it's acceptable to play spaces within 5 minutes of walking distance, but there's a significant drop for playing in farther areas. And we also observe that families in subdivided flats and tenement buildings has a significant drop in playing outside, and there's a significant increase in playing within their own residence. So the rise is because the families living in subdivided flats and tenement buildings before the pandemic don't see their residence as a location for playing. So apart from the time and location of play, we can also see the change in social play. So we can see that it has been greatly reduced during the pandemic. And there is a reduction of around 40% for social play in tenement buildings and subdivided flats. The parents said the children wanted to play with their peers, but they were able to meet their playmates. And the impact is particularly significant on families who are new to the community. So there's an example about a family who moved from To Kwa Wan to Tin Shui Wai. So in To Kwa Wan, the children would play with their classmates. But during the pandemic, as they can't go to school, so they can't meet the classmates and can't go out. So we also research on the parents' consideration for letting children play outside. So some background. During our research, the pandemic condition was relatively stable. and some playgrounds have been opened during that time. However, during that time, only around 14% of parents feel that it's suitable to let their children go outside to play. And some of them feel, around 30% of them feel, if the number of confirmed cases has further decreased, they will let the children go out. And some feel if the Hong Kong's vaccination rate decreased, they will let them go out. And at that time, there are around 77% of parents thinking if the public play space reopened, they will let the children go and play. However, during that time, actually the public playgrounds are reopened. So we can see that parents may not be fully informed that the playground was reopened. So during our interviews, we can feel that, actually the parents told us that they are very nervous about their children's academic progress. And they actually want the children to focus on learning online at home. And that would further decrease the time that children allowed to go out to play. So some parents express that they can only bring the children to somewhere near the school to play, or to play when they go out to supermarket. So there are some insights that we want to share. First, play is an essential part of family life and public life. And children can, through play, to establish their connection with the neighborhood. And closing of public play space in school greatly impede children's and caregivers' social connection. Outdoor play and going to schools cannot be easily replaced by online learning. So especially for families living in deprived condition or not that affluent. This impact is huge. And we can also see parents' perception of safety and risk affecting children's opportunities of outdoor play during the pandemic. So although some playgrounds are reopened during our research, parents are really concerned. And it's not that when somebody in the government say it's safe to go out, then the parents would let their children go out. So comparing to the time we had the research right now, we are in a more severe condition. We can also think about after the pandemic, how we can be recovered and how we can develop the resilience. So there are some suggestions. So this photo, it's showing somewhere in Bristol, UK. So they temporarily blocked the street to allow children to play. So Hong Kong is in shortage of play space. Some districts in Hong Kong is deprived of quality of playgrounds with high quality. So in Hong Kong, each child can only enjoy 0.2 square meters of play space. So we can see some districts are really deprived of quality play space. So our first suggestion is that we can use some more creative ideas to provide play opportunities for children. Not only there are playing on streets in the UK, there's many other places outside the world that children can play on streets. So this was last summer. So this is in Changzhou, a school playground. We let children play there together. So this is a rooftop in Shenzhen. And people from neighborhood were very helpful to transport to rooftop materials. And this is also a flat roof in Chengyi. What are the strengths of these kind of informal play space comparing to the designated play space? So we, as we talked about earlier, parents are worried letting their children to go out to playgrounds. So there are several criteria that parents would consider when they let the children to play. One of them is cleanliness of the play space. And with fewer people, and parents would let their children to go out if that playground they can see some more familiar faces. So during the pandemic, some parents told us if there are some people they know are going out to that playground as well, they will let their children join. Because parents of the other children will help supervise their own children. So we think as stakeholders of that neighborhood can utilize some spaces in that neighborhood that may encourage parents and their children to have outdoor play. That can also help the parents, not only the children, because parents, during the children playing, they can exchange some thoughts, for example, about the pandemic measures. So another suggestion is about the play space managers. So we talked about for families with limited living space, stress and difficulty of playing at home are relatively high. So, outside Hong Kong, some government would avoid closing all playgrounds together. They would try to understand the needs of residents of that community. And we also need to think about why some families won't let the children to go out even when the outdoor playgrounds are reopened. Talking about communication, one of our conclusion is the play-based management can directly affect parents' confidence in using the play space. So I'd like to share. So some years ago, Playwright used a participatory approach to design a playground with children. So around 1 year later, when the playground was opened, we invited children who had participated in design to go together. But it took time for the playground to be built, and children who designed the playground already had grown up. So when it was open, when an older child going out to play, that playscape he designed, he or she was stopped by a management staff saying that he or she is too old to play that facility. So how can the frontline staff to evaluate the risk? Is that correct? And that would directly affect the user's confidence to use that play space. So on the right, it's a direct investigation report done by the Office of the Ombudsman about maintenance and repair of play and fitness equipment inside public housing. And there's definitely some room for improvement. So a number of studies have pointed to the positive effects of enabling children to access to nature can enhance their resilience to stress. So although Hong Kong has rich and diverse natural resources and convenient transportation network, we are easy to get access to nature. But actually, children's ability to move and commute in the city is incomparable with adults. Mobility of children in urban spaces is much higher than in the nature, as they need to be brought to country parks and beaches by adults. So when we see the urban parks, yes, there are many trees and flowers, but that greenery is actually like a backdrop. Usually they are forbidden to be touched. So we are thinking if children can interact with the greenery in urban parks. Other than playing in the nature, we would like to think more about recognition of the role and significance of play space in building a cohesive and resilient community. The play space is not only an area for recreation. Many regions and cities also incorporate play space into planning of social infrastructure. So it's generally believed that infrastructure such as water, electricity, communication, transportation are particularly important for operation of a city. But actually, other than this kind of infrastructure, social infrastructure is also crucial. So they also promote interpersonal communication and emotional connection. For example, a library does not only provide a space for borrowing books, but it also promotes communication between people. So if there's a lack of social infrastructure, it's really difficult for residents to integrate into the community. So we want to improve the play space and also a framework for the sustainable development of play spaces. And we want to avoid a deficit of play space in some districts. We need to see all this with the demographics of districts. So on the right is the study done in Taiwan. So they also studied the coverage of play space or youth playable space. So we Playwright also did similar studies in past years. But there are some difficulties. So when we establish this kind of play space designs and guidelines, we think children's voices must be heard. My conclusion is, so during the pandemic, children are lonelier than ever than the previous generation. So we want in the post-pandemic, we can create possibility of creating favorable conditions for children and families to play outside. So that would require the collaboration of design and planning professionals, place-based managers, and other community stakeholders.
加強到社區嘅韌性。咁我好希望咧，可以有機會再喺光底下咧，就再同
we can see
好似而家咁樣對住個 mon 咁樣同大家傾偈。好，講到呢度
everyone under the sunlight, not in the monitor. So thank you, Ernest. So we have two questions.
The audience asks, do you have any experience or idea on how the resilience of this subdivided unit resident could build up as a larger community, because they are currently dealing with the problem themselves, or the make do in the individual effort as mentioned by the audience? And are there any external aids such as the social service that the household could seek? And the second question is, do you think the subdivided unit should be completely replaced by the subsidized housing, or these units has a value to be stayed in the community or the society?
So thank you for your questions. Shall I answer it in English or Cantonese? Both okay, or what? I'm okay.
Maybe English. Either way is fine. Carla will do the translation, but do it like 講慢少少。
You mean English or Cantonese? I'll try to. Oh, okay. 我簡單答啦，因為都好，即係你問嘅問題係一個政策上面一個即係啲制度嘅問題。咁第一樣嘢啦，就係佢哋有冇啲即係 social service？佢哋係有 social service 嘅，即係同埋就係佢哋好多呢一啲即係我所去 identify 嘅。
So I understand there are some social service. And then as a response to the first question.
咁但係即係喺佢哋嘅生活係如果冇咗啲 social service 係好難維持嘅。
And we all understand it is impossible to maintain the SDU's lives without social services. And actually, these are run by NGOs. And we think NGOs is necessary for SDU's uses to provide a life with more quality.
我哋 observation 就係覺得咧，喺社區裏面咧，唔一定係 place
So
based。
there are some linkage with Ernest studies.
好重要嘅。咁咩係 voluntary space 咧？其實係
we think it's very important to have voluntary spaces in community. For example, some communal centers. And these kind of centers would have people to monitor children's play. But these kind of voluntary space serve multiple purposes. SDU families can go there to, say, wash the clothes, cooking. So it's really essential to have this kind of voluntary spaces. And there should be more, actually. So as it's impossible to maintain SDU's life in a highly commercial or oriented space. And the second, in response to second question, providing online classes or online activities is that kind of alternative. So during the pandemic, going online is a way, I think. But so the question is if we can completely replace SDU. But what we should think about is why SDU would appear. There should be some problem in land use or some policies. Of course, it's not something that we need to conserve, but and of course, SDU should not appear, but it really reflected the problems we have.
Adequate use of space 同埋一個係大家係一個比較 equal access to space 嘅，或者 housing 嘅，即係可能呢個係我哋即係希望要存在嘅。咁但係
the ultimate goal is to provide adequate space and housing.
即係香港喺一個房屋政策嘅歷史裏面，一個其實係一個延續嚟嘅，就係我哋會將一啲 squatter area 或者 squatter settlement 一啲係 informal housing 變成一個 buffer， 即係個 buffer zone。
It's actually it maintains a continuity in Hong Kong's housing history. We had previously squatter areas and some as informal housing. But of course, with better alternatives, we would like to replace subsidized units. So I would like to ask Ernest.
咁依你所見，其實除咗嗰個分佈之外，入邊嗰內容，即係啲遊戲好唔好玩，遊樂設施好唔好玩，或者
So based on our young understanding,
都會影響到啲小朋友
whether that playscape is funny, would that improve? Would that attract more children to go play? So Ernest, I'm not sure how familiar the audience with playgrounds, because maybe the last time you go to a playground is really long time ago.
可能去到高小已經開始越嚟越少見㗎啦。
And
即係講緊12、13歲更加見唔到佢哋添啦咁樣。
So actually, who goes to play space, playground, formal play space? Actually, around for primarily or primary school students.
佢哋都係好嘅，咁佢哋可能係就係適合一啲比較細個嘅小朋友。
So one of the reasons it's maybe the playgrounds can only satisfy needs of younger children, but for older children or young teenagers, the play space cannot satisfy them. Maybe they still go to these play space, but say after playing for a while, they just turn back to their phone. 一啲嘅小朋友嘅需要，我哋唔好將小朋友理解佢哋係同一班人，其實佢哋 we can't see children as a whole. Actually, it's really diversified. For toddlers, preschoolers, to older children. Can our play space cater for such a wide spectrum of children. That's what we need to think about. So there is another question coming from Sarah.
The
question is if both speakers can see positive elements arise from the pandemic conditions. So this is Ruby to answer. To SBU people, of course, there's not much positivity I can see. They already need to rely on spaces outside of flats to live, to lead their normal life. So the pandemic really has hit them badly. So possibly there's some good stuff, like if they are supported by NGOs.
頭先係講嗰個 virtual space 嗰樣嘢，咁當然我哋覺得virtual space 唔可以。
That's why I talked about virtual space. Of course, that cannot replace actual activities, but it can overcome the virtual, the physical boundaries. It's a possible positive elements, but I'm really not that sure. It can, a virtual meeting or virtual learning can give a different perspective. Learners, and this is a very hard question.
因為個 pandemic 讓佢同佢嘅小朋友可以有多啲嘅時間喺屋企可以相處啦。咁因為我自己本身冇小朋友，我只係從我或者我啲同事
Sarah who shared her experience that she can spend more time with her children. So I don't have my own children, but I learned from my friends.
當一停課咧，對佢哋嚟講咧，通常我都聽到係好多嘅焦慮嘅，即使唔係。
So when school closed, what he immediately hears a lot of worries. So some parents can work from home, but when the same space need to be shared by different activities, that conflict, it's really obvious. So for example, when a dad is having a meeting, his own son is like climbing behind. It's really difficult. Well, of course, staying at home together can pull all the family members together, but it's that so easy to have a clear differentiation between roles, different roles of one person. So it's a challenge to many people.
基於兩位 speaker 之前 share 過嘅 material 咧，我而家腦海裏邊諗緊就有兩個我哋傾緊嘅 potential exhibitors 啦。咁佢哋都對於你哋
based on what both speakers presented before, we may be able to line up two coexist with you. So there's one potential exhibitor who has been developing furniture with the SBU residents to utilize their own space. But during the pandemic, it's impossible to go up to the unit to, say, doing site measurements. So they are trying to develop, or they're thinking about developing a toolkit for SBU residents to build their own furniture at home. So second question is to Ernest. So Ernest shared about playing on the streets, which we were always told that we should not go for that.
OK 好，我覺得係頭先你講嗰個係咪有即係幫佢哋設計家私樣嘢啦？即係其實我覺得係
about designing furniture for SBUs. I also find that very interesting and amazing that SBU residents design their own furniture. But one problem they are facing is that they always move. So it's really difficult for them to move that custom-made furniture to other flats when they move out. So in my own view, there's some problem for highly customized furniture. But about developing a toolkit, it can be a really practical solution because SBU residents are really skillful. So although they are skillful, they are not equipped with materials. So if somebody is going to provide some materials for them, this is a very promising direction. So I agree with Ruby. The custom-made furniture, of course, it's great. But the keyword I can think about is transformable. Is that this furniture has to be really flexible because, say, for example, children growing up, they need to bring much more textbooks in. That space may need to change as well. So the use of furniture must be very adaptive, and the furniture itself has to be adaptive. For example, what I can think about is some libraries outside, libraries in Europe, or is that other than lending books, they also lend equipment. They also lend, like, say, equipment for them to help transform the homes. So except tangible tools, toolbox actually. They can lend toolboxes. So if except providing tools, they also provide a platform for knowledge exchange of how to use those tools. Actually, in Taiwan, there are some similar examples. Actually, we had that in Hong Kong too. We have this main repairing Hong Kong group. It's not limited to tangible resources like screws. We also want intangible knowledge of tools using. So, the second question is about usage of public space and informally. So, using or utilizing public space, would that actually arise concern of other users of that space? So, designated public space, designated play space, and informal, non-designated play space, both have their own merit.
對小朋友嚟講，其實有啲時候唔係一個 unfinished 嘅 play space， 一個可以俾
children an unfinished play space which they can show their creativity. It's also fun. So when we recognize both the merits of both spaces, are there also any challenges? Well, yes. Sometimes we also think it's quite dangerous for children to play in informal play space. It can be dangerous to children, or maybe it's dangerous to the cars parking in the car park as well. So about the example in the UK, coordination and communication between different stakeholders in the community is really important. So for example, they can communicate and schedule a day for people, for the youth to play around. And how can we do it? So, planning play space, that process can also be very beneficial to reconnecting people, reestablishing the links.
嘅一個議題啦，起碼我哋都係有好多嘅 common ground。咁但係實際執行嘅時候，我哋咪因應。
Actually, playing in non-designated place is not a very controversial topic. We do have many common grounds. So we playwright do partner with local organizations. We can provide professional skills. They providing safety and risk assessment. And the community organization can provide, can try to link up the community.
一啲嘅挑戰性，但係你唔需要咁快抹殺佢。如果唔係，你將佢做得太安全，佢又變得唔好玩。咁所以，我相信呢一個
it's really important to evaluate like how safe or how playful or how funny that space can be. So we really need that process of communication on that. I would like to add about how to assess or utilize a play space.
structure 我哋叫 structural inequalities 啦，去影響到嘅，即係例如我點樣用
accessibility of one space may affect it. For example, who is entitled to use or authorized to use that space. So it's related to some inequalities based on gender and age or ethnicity. And that's obstacle for people to use that space. So, for example, in Kwai-Ching district, there are many playgrounds, but as the residents, some of them don't go there because they don't feel comfortable to go. They feel they are not belonged to that space. For example, there are many elderly staying in that playground that some ladies and don't feel comfortable to use that space. So how people with different social backgrounds can use that space. 即係可能唔同嘅，即係可能 NGO 又好，或者可能即係學校又好，即係唔同嘅 parties， 佢哋可以營造到一種我覺得我 feel safe 喺呢一個社區裏面。Different parties can help people to feel safe to use that space and to make people to reach a consensus so that everyone in the community feel okay to use play space, and that needs people to communicate through, and that needs to be regularly reviewed. For example, if I think somebody violates that rules, I would like to review that. So who to supervise the use of that space? Back to basic. That relates to how we see that space, how we allow different people to use that space differently. It's establishing solidarity. It's how strict is the management of this kind of public space by the government. I would like to talk about some empirical findings. So my observation is it's selective, especially for FEHD. In wet markets, they do monitor that strictly. Why that location is monitored strictly is that it really requires a high standard of accessibility. But in some spaces are relatively less stringent. So if that doesn't affect everyday life of other users of that space, maybe that management is less stringent. So unless some people report that informal usage, the government would then send the officers to interrupt that.
佢係有留一個
So what I feel is the authority does have some flexibilities in monitoring the spaces.
實在我都唔能夠好容易咁樣回答到呢個問題。
It's not that easy to answer this question about management. So I can talk about example about quite well planned play space. It's a Belcher's Bay playground. It has been really popular with people from different generations, from very early to very late. It's very popular. So there are some moving furniture there, which are really relatively simple. And I can feel that the management of that play space is different from the other formal play space in the town, which allow flexibility. So, like people from different generations, like walking their pets, and riding bikes, and perform like different activities that attract many reporting to that. So I feel people really do reach an informal consensus about what can or what can't be done. So to establish a consensus may need to be relied on communication.
理解一個公共空間嘅 capability 其實就會削弱咗，因為我由得你話但係我可能同
If we rely on a set of guidelines, our flexibility must be greatly reduced. But if we talk that through, we set up that by communication between different stakeholders there, then
master 到個 conflict， 我哋點樣 build up 我哋自己嘅
we may be able to master conflicts. We can try to discuss through the management that it's actually impossible to pursue accident zero play space.
我哋唔係冇 creative 嘅 designer， 唔係冇
we are not lacking of creative designers, but even though we can design really creative playgrounds or funny or interesting play space, once we receive a complaint, then this proposal will be greatly affected. So we are thinking about the whole decision process. Can we invite more different stakeholders to join. And overseas, parks or playgrounds would invite the public to provide their comments or advices, because the behavior of a community or customs of community would evolve. For example, not that many people will walk the pets in the past, but now there are more. And if the management authority would delegate this process back to the community, would that give a better management control of management benefits to these play space? So I have one more question. Is that
我哋會唔會有包容一啲細路仔，即係真係喺嗰度住嘅細路仔，或者有冇一啲好可以容納到好多人意見，攞到好多人意見嘅做 survey 嘅方法咧？因為
any survey methods to collect different users' opinions and advices?
都係靜雞雞咁樣就有人決定啊，我應該係俾3歲至6歲嘅小朋友嘅，咁係咪又或者會唔會設計咗之後，使用者都係會用一啲你諗唔到佢嘅方法嚟到使用呢啲本來唔係你 design 俾佢嘅玩意
咧？最尾個問題先係一定會嘅，因為小朋友會點樣玩係一定會有落差嘅，而唔好將佢理解成為一個落差先，即係你打算起一條上滑梯，你就諗住。
The second question is about even if somebody like the designer thinks that this playground is designated for say 3 to 6 years old children, would that be utilized by other age groups? So my reply is definitely. So the designer should not feel unhappy that space is utilized by different age groups in different means. So the question, the solution would be the designer may think about how people from different age groups can play that device differently. So back to the first question.
係，我哋要揾出 appropriate 嘅 engagement 嘅 strategy 去針對唔同年紀或者唔同嘅能力嘅小朋友，其實都唔單止係小朋友，即係所有嘅，即係個 public 都本身唔係一個 public，there's no single public，right？ 所以小朋友都一樣，我哋要揾出適當佢哋嘅。
We need to identify an appropriate method to engage the children. It's surveying an appropriate method.
然後個過程係會 encourage 即係
So in 2019, the LCSD once said they would like to transform the parks, 170 numbers of parks in Hong Kong, and invite the public to participate. So what I can think of is to conduct a survey with the children, but it's not that easy. For example, I saw photos that about climbing walls, showing that photos to the children. So there are two photos. One is a plastic climbing wall. Another one that has a rocky rock appearance. But the majority of children choose the more colorful but plastic look climbing wall. So because by children's perception, they want something more colorful. So maybe children choose that photos because it's more colorful, it looks cuter. So our method is we start that by playing with these children first, then ask. For example, we use some models, physical models, to play with them. So sometimes we design the models with the children. They may not feel that if they build that model, it's not that attractive to that children. They maybe just feel that like gluing it, it's interesting. So we need to build some prototypes to play with them and to check with them the feedback. 全盤啲嘅 understanding， 因為啱嘅，我哋冇辦法可以做到一個遊樂場去滿足晒所有嘢嘅。咁但係我哋要Of course, we can't. We can't satisfy everybody's needs. 咁所以我哋應該要做一啲全面啲。We need to do some holistic research or audit to check the distribution of the demographics and the behavior of the users in that play space. And then we can evaluate if we should, say, demolish that play space, transform it, redesign it. 不過係咪求其？我唔係講大家係求其做嘅，我都唔知個 rationale 係乜嘢，係啦，我都唔知個 rationale 係乜嘢嘅。戴翻頭盔先，唔好意思啦。
睇下我哋觀眾有冇其他問題先，似乎就冇啦。咁都有喺過去嗰4場嘅 salon 裏邊咧，其實我哋有冇話每一個 speaker 嚟 share 嘅嘢，會唔會直接就成為咗一件 exhibit， 或者會成為咗一個workshop， 或者會成為咗另外一個喺UABB 裏邊 seminar， 或者會 spark interest。咁我諗其實我作為 part of the curator team 啦，就係希望第一係 spark interest 啦，大家嚟聽咗 attendees architect HAI 嘅 methods。The question is whether we panelists and speakers have any thoughts in terms of what we would like to see in the exhibition in response to the topics raised today. So as a curator, the first thing is I want to spark interest. 或者 Ruby 做緊嘅嘢，可能同我哋某啲 designer propose 嘅 design strategies 可以有一啲嘅crossover。咁我見到 Roger 係想 Roger 你咪會開麥講嘢，開 cam 講嘢。
首先我唔知有冇其他 SC member 喺度啦，咁我都代表 SC member 多謝。
I would like to represent the SC members to thank the curatorial teams and the speakers because these talks are very inspirational.
不過我就想有個睇法就係其實Ruby 同埋 Ernest 今日講嘅嘢其實好有趣，就係話都幾啱嗰個題目，就係話今次
the topics shared by the two speakers are interesting and related to our UABB topic. It's a paradox.
我哋發得我哋好有啟，即係我哋都好多嘅想法啦。咁但係
But how to cope with the crisis? We have many different thinking. But is that pushing forward?
甚至乎我亦都見過曾幾何時幾年前有啲嘅設計比賽就話設計一個 nano
about how to cope with these crises. Is that does that reflect that we acknowledge that crisis, or we feel that we can permit it to stay? For example, the custom-made furniture in SDU.
咁喺呢個即係其實嗰個逆境，其實我哋大家都共處緊嘅，因為雖然除咗呢個劏房同埋呢個係一個問題之外，其實各階層嘅人，因為香港地少，
that the problem not only exists in SDU, but also in other people living in different other conditions. So that level of resilience, how can we carry it out, like perseverance across different different demographics?
我覺得可能係喺呢一個嘅 UABB 係一個好好嘅議題，我亦都希望。
I feel this is a very good topic to be discussed in the UABB, and I can see many potential exhibitors in the attendees. So I would like to invite invite the attendees to submit more proposals to enrich our UABB. Thank you. There is also opportunity for exhibitors to discuss how to cope with the lacking of space problem in Hong Kong. So thanks so much for your time and your participation. And thank you, Ruby. Thank you, Ernest. So I hope all potential exhibitors will submit their proposal by 4th of April. So we'll see you in the next exhibition and next event of UABB. Sorry, so there is a toolkit that for engaging children and community. And I would like to also share a video about creating pop-up and informal play space. And Ernest will put these two links in our UABB Facebook page. So thank you and have a nice Sunday. Goodbye.